Dinner yet? Right. Have a cookie.
Okay, we are live.
All right. May we get a copy? Sure. Everybody get their copy?
Yeah, those front ones that don't have holes in them are all extras anyways. But you can have anything else. Yeah.
I don't think so. We will get started. Terry, do you want to do the roll call?
Rich, you're here. Jim Jantz. Danelle Allen.
Here.
Kelly Hale.
Here.
Karen Wise.
Here.
And myself, Terry Welch. We have Michael Charmings, Town Manager.
Yep.
Present. We have Christina Robinson, CEO, present. We have Barry Jordan, present, representing GA. And we have two citizens, residents of Sebago. And the members of the committee are all present.
All right. Good. Mr. Town Manager, is he okay? Can you,
Yes, I was gonna ask that. The code enforcement go first because she's on overtime, but that's up to you.
Either way, I don't think Terry's gonna take too long.
Want me to go first?
Yes.
I'll come up here so you can hear me good.
So in your booklet, just to get everybody on the same page, for the number that he's at. I think I'd have had that before I told you. 3354, and I do want to mention that we updated the, which has a couple more to do, the revenue sheet. So that, that department where it's looking at an increase because of the increased expenditures, we're also looking at a increase in your last layout, the new revenues are in there, of $18,410 reimbursement from 1,100. We get 70% reimbursement from actual expenditures. So we back out everything but the expenditures. So if those monies are expended on those bottom lines in the detail budget, 70% of that's reimbursed from the state of Maine. So when you're looking at his budget, which is mandated, that amount is what we're projecting to come in to offset those expenditures.
So I can give you a little bit of a rundown. Obviously, you got the figures right in front of you, but there's a few outstanding invoices from some oil companies that haven't come in yet, that hasn't been turned in on the warrant. And I'm not sure how close you are, but we've actually had this year in expenses for general assistance, as of today, $25,447. And that's all the outstanding invoices, an estimate as close as I could what they actually be.
Say that number again.
25,447, of which we'll get 70% of that back from the state. However, the invoice that we sent them on the 1st of December, we still haven't got our check yet. we actually have outstanding, $9,071 from December 3rd. I'll give that again, $9,071 outstanding from December 3rd, and $5,832 outstanding from the 13th of February. So we're waiting for those to come back in.
Those are the reimbursements.
Yeah. And they're running a few months behind. As you can imagine, if 3 fiscal years ago, we had about 7,500 in GA, last year had almost 17,000, and we're at 25,000 this year. And if every other city and town in the state is in the same ratio, you can imagine they're buried alive up there with trying to get caught up.
So it's true that the town has to spend it before they get reimbursed. Is that correct?
Sometimes I mean, I've sent two in this year. You could do it every month, but if you only got $400, I don't send it. I wait until a couple of 3 months go by and send it in. We also have which is not connected to GA, for people that need help but don't qualify for GA, we have the fuel fund in Sebago, and we've given out $5,171 in that account year to date, and that ends the middle of April. It doesn't pick up again until mid-October. So,
Could you say that figure again, please?
5171 in the oil fuel fund.
That's based on charitable donations?
Charitable donations, selectmen actually voted last year 10,000 to put into that account at the board meeting.
Yes.
So there's about 4,900 still in that account. Something like that.
And during a typical year, do you usually see a lot of increases in the electricity bills that are being paid? Because I know they're not allowed to shut off your power during the winter.
Right, if you go through the notes, I actually have included the electrical bills since November because nobody can get shut off. But come April 15th, everybody's gonna get their disconnect notices, and then people will start coming in. And what I typically do is call Central Maine Power with the client, and I help negotiate a down payment, which we pay, and they make the monthly payment on a regular basis plus the bill. And I can, typically, if a customer calls in, they can get a 1 year, whatever they owe divided by 12 months. I can get it stretched out 24 months, which really cuts their payment down and makes it easier for them to get through it. So by me jumping in and helping them, they actually save a few bucks a month on their bill. And I can prevent them from being disconnected. But,
So Barry, so when they had the first meeting here, they were going to go have all the presentations and go through the meetings, and like next week, we have another meeting, we're gonna update the spreadsheets, because there were some errors in the formulas in here, but they weren't going category by category, department by department, and approving till the last meeting.
right, exactly, yeah, which is the way it really should be done. And that way you got your whole budget sitting in front of you before you try to, oh, well, okay, yours, and then all of a sudden you get to the end and you're way over what you want to be, and there's no way to cut it then because, so I think it's a good idea to accumulate all the information, have a final meeting and decide what you're gonna do.
Yeah.
When you do a GA, you can sugarcoat it, and instead of putting in 33,000, I could put in 3,000. But by federal and state law, I have to disperse whatever is qualified. So putting in 3,000 makes it look great, but I could spend 40.
Right.
And it's one of the only budgets that you can overspend without going back to the town asking for more money.
It's by a percentage though, so we have a state, it used to be set by state amounts that you had a cap at, and if people knew what they were, they're outrageous. It was $300,000-400,000 for a small town. We still, for several items like general assistance and road plowing, can go over a budget, but it's still a percentage. If we don't calculate that out, the expenditures and appropriation, and we go over those percentages, we do get hit on an audit. So we still try to get those, so like every other budget, to get that appropriation as close as we can, then offset it. If we don't appropriate money, it doesn't make a difference how much money we come in, we cannot spend that appropriation. And this one account is a little bit different, but it's sort of like Public Works, meaning we can go over, but we still need to get with good faith that as close as we can get it.
Right.
So Michael, if I was projecting for currently, and I looked at, you know, we're pretty close to $30,000 already to date, 25.
Well, the reason why you have that to date is because he's talking about expenditures that go directly for reimbursement, and the other expenditures will be the administration of that. We don't get
No, I
reimbursed.
understand.
Yep.
So if I was projecting for the end of the year, I would say we'd get pretty close to 40,000. So you would have to have that money in the coffers, but then you get.
Well, we're pretty much through the winter heating, so all of that general assistance for heating is gonna be gone for the rest of the season. We get through the central main power. So I suspect that we've hit the peak of the monthly assistance. And it's not gonna be that.
And it's usually, Barry has been through this, but I used to do this quite a bit too, is twice a year with CMP, because CMP, they turn it off right before they had the cutoff where they can't turn it off anymore.
Correct.
And then when they can turn it off, those are the two times that they come into the electricity.
November 15th and April. But if we did an average, we're at 3,000 a month, and we've done 9 months, so we've got 3 months left. That's another 9 grand, so we're about 34,000 if we stayed on the same pace. I don't think we'll hit 30,000, to be honest with you. But the 33 is a very good number. And we also had a burial this year for 1,050. I think that's the first one we've had in a long time. So,
Jim, do you have a-
Yeah, I have a question on the rental entry. You have, is that something that can fluctuate quite a bit?
yeah, I mean, we have a few places in town that have rentals, and
Probably, it must be hard to forecast and,
it's hard to forecast.
okay.
If somebody is basically paying their rent on time every month, and all of a sudden they lose their job for 2 months, then as soon as they're 5 days late on the next month's rent, they get a eviction notice. So, the thing that I've been able to do with all of the landlords, especially if it's a new renter, and they have built into their monthly rent the security deposit, because they didn't have the whole security deposit up front. So now they're paying, $1,500 a month rent and $200 a month for security till that's paid up. If I pay the security deposit, which if you have to pay it if they won't accept it without it, and then 3 months later, they move out and get all the security deposit back, they take that security deposit that I paid and take it with them, because they get the security deposit. So I've been able to negotiate with the landlords not to collect that security deposit when I pay the rent. So that we're not giving somebody an opportunity to, to make $400 or $500 and 2 months later move out and take it with them. So,
You generally use your actuals for your, numbers for this coming year, like on the rentals. You have an actual of, about 14,500. I didn't look back through the numbers.
I think this year's been pretty high on rent, to be honest with you.
At the next meeting, I'll update your expenses, because like this last warrant we just signed off on was close to $500,000 in expenditures, to show you how much we fluctuate in our expenditures.
Yeah, I didn't look back to see what the entry was for, this coming year. Is basically, your actuals for this year.
Well, that one that's written was 6, and then about 10,000 in rent this year so far.
Yeah, it's projected for 15,000 for next year.
Right. I'm at 10,000 right now. When I do a disbursement, I have all my categories written down, and whatever I pay, I put in that category, and then.
Yeah, I mean, we have an expense summary report that's valid through March 5th, and it shows it at 14,572. There might be some.
I may have just missed
So
one.
15, It's a good estimate for next year.
Pretty close. We still have 3 months left to this fiscal year, but it's a lot closer than last year. It was 4,000.
And the average rent's $17.95 a month. So it doesn't take long if you gotta pay the past months and the current month.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't really want to cut this short, but I think GA is one of those budgets that we're not going to ask for a 5% reduction on it because Barry's got to pay it anyway. So if he gets the best everything he gets, we take it and move on.
I do have one question.
Yep.
How many people did you service this past year?
I mean,
How many people did you service this past year?
On the, and you can write this down, on the February disbursement, there were 9 cases, 20 people. And on the December 3rd, there were 16 with 25 people. And then what hasn't been sent to the state, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 since February. For
12 cases?
yeah, for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10.
That last oil,
That doesn't count the fuel assistance.
And do you have the numbers off the head from last year, how much it increased? No.
But I do have those numbers, believe it or not.
Thank you. I like my
Thought
data.
you'd throw me a curve, didn't you?
I like my data.
I didn't have any idea of looking for any savings here. I was just curious about where it might go. I mean, I'd rather talk about the roads.
No, I'm with you. I'm just, we promised Christina 3 minutes and we're into like 15.
Yeah, I basically am done.
Thank you, Barry.
Unless you have any other questions for me.
I think we're good. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Barry.
Made it easy.
We try.
Christina, you can put your chair where. Thanks for coming tonight.
she's back.
This would be,
Page 2. Code enforcement. Page 2.
Oh, yep. District 21.
yeah, but it's kind of funky because with the government administration, it gets into like the benefits, so it's kind of split up. Wages are here, benefits are elsewhere. Christina, did you just want to explain what your current staffing level is and maybe what it was last year and what you're aiming for the foreseeable future?
So last year, the office had 1 code enforcement officer employee.
That's you.
Yeah, and then so in September, the manager at the time allowed me to hire a temporary land use assistant to help me out in the office because I just couldn't keep up. And so now he's temporary, but it's 1.5.
Okay, so he's a part-time.
He's part-time right now. He's taking on secretarial for zoning board of appeals, planning board, and for code enforcement. And I think we're asking for full-time for next year. And we would like to add public works,
Okay.
assisting public works a little bit with some of the paperwork for that.
There's several things with that. So we have also this, he does the posting of notification, a lot of computer work for us too, which a lot of people complain we don't get it on fast enough, but we try very hard to get everything up and loaded. But on the public works end of it, that ties into our public easement roads and the notifications that we're mandated to put out and how we upkeep those roads. And also with public works, as you know, we don't have a lot of people on that team. and our roads need a road management system put back into place. If you look at, I always throw that out there. If you didn't change oil in your car, you didn't save 1995. That's how long I've been saying it, because I think it's $100 for an oil change now. But with the road management systems that we look at, that to get that back into an actual system of how roads and culverts get put into place. I mean, this chart's probably 30 years old and it's still quite efficient. Is when you go through a time period and you have a certain drop in the years of the conditions of the road, for each dollar of renovation that it costs here, once it passes that point, it costs you $4 or $5 to do that road. And we're at the point now where it looks like they've been chasing roads and not doing them systematically. And I think looking at the longer term with these roads and our infrastructure, it's gonna save hundreds of thousands of dollars in this town, okay? So that is another piece we'd like to fill into that. Right now, Christina's, fairly new here, and she's taken on a lot of work that's actually going backwards to go forward. And our growth here is increased a lot. Our building permits are up, and even this time of year, it's busy. And the planning department has been taken a lot on too with ordinance reviews. And then there's a comprehensive plan coming up, as you'll see earlier with the selectmen, later with the selectmen's pushing to move that forward. So the workload right now for a code enforcement officer who is actually a director of the planning office and code enforcement officer, if you looked at it, there's no way she can keep up that workload. Okay.
Yeah.
He's also taken on the responsibilities for E911. There is a lot of, back paperwork stuff that you didn't really know was there. It takes a lot of time, so he's taking that one for me.
Christina, have you ever provided some of the year-over-year income on behalf of the code enforcement office? Because I think partly a problem in the past that, certain fees weren't being charged. So it'd be interesting to see, what's been changing.
Did you print
So-
last night?
Yeah, so I provide mandated, I have to every quarter provide as a treasurer reports to the selectmen on the condition of the town. And I do that monthly with the revenue control and appropriation control reports. And the revenues from the code enforcement for permits and electrical permits, building permits are up a lot. That's why you see in the revenue projections that you have that we're increasing that. The one thing we don't have in there now that I want to bring up because it's directly related to the section of the planning is that we need to get a flow chart in here better. So when these monies come in that either go into escrow or building and permit fees, they're properly recorded. So when you're looking at, for instance, under the department looking right now, under planner fees, you have $20,000 in there. We're not going to be able to cover all those because the planner does other things besides getting escrows put into place by people that come in that have applications that are beyond the planning board, beyond the code enforcement officer. The applicant's liable to pay for that. We need to appropriate money to cover that, like I said before, but a lot of that's going to be covered by the amounts that we charge the applicants to cover their own fees. But on the other side, there's always going to be 10, 15% of the time that we use a planner, we're not going to get reimbursed because we get what ifs, we get questions from the code enforcement officers, we get questions from selectmen. It's never going to be totally covered. But where you're seeing that 20,000, you are going to see a big bulk of that covered. I have a hard time projecting out some of these this year, and it'll take 2 or 3 years because when these monies come in, sort of like the transfer station, they're probably not recorded the way I like them recorded. So in the future, I can project out saying, here's how we're going to cover that. So that's when you're looking at that budget, that 20,000 looks like a big number, but believe me, that's going to be cut down quite a bit. On the other end, and I'll be nice, when we get into the administration budget, you'll see we've been averaging over $75,000 a year in legal fees here, okay? And that's probably what's going to be this year, and I've got a budget of 50 next year, and then we have a reserve that goes into that. Some of our legal issues, I've been summoned twice. I've been served today, okay? So some of our legal issues are going to be a ways out, and some of them could have been prevented by more proper, if we had a proper planner in place and more guidance and more training. our training budget here is, everybody here has to be certified. She probably has, I don't know how certifications, at least 8, okay? Shoreland zoning, legal, LPI, and they're mandated. And once you let them fall out of place, you have to start almost all over to get that training back rather than keeping it up. And she didn't have, and I don't want to pick on Christina, that position did not have any money for gear or any training, and that's, we can't allow that. And she's not safe going out, and she can't keep her training up.
Now, is that training going to be applied to the assistant as well?
The,
Free training, usually, I include him on free training, always. If it's like an MMA class for like $60 that he needs, I would put him in that. But anything more than that, I'd have to really think about.
Doing more of the administrative rather than the field visits.
Yeah, he's not doing inspections.
Okay.
But I keep him in the loop when I take the free trainings online, or if there's something available locally that's free, so that he can pick up on it and start learning it.
in looking at the position going forward, when you have a part-time position go to a full-time position, we only look at, like anything else I do, I don't look at people, I look at the positions. If that goes to a full-time position, if the budget goes through, then that position is open for application and people have to apply for that position, okay?
Yeah, and those additional costs, like if he goes full-time, the benefit will be reflected in the first lines of government administration, so we can go over that at some point. Michael, you noted that those planner fees, you wanted to keep them at $20,000 just because we don't know whether we're gonna get reimbursed and people challenge things. I can understand that concept. Year to date, it shows that we've only spent $587.96. Is that just because the applicants have been paying their share, or?
I would guess because it hasn't been monitored correctly and entered correctly, the expenditures, because there isn't any way we only spent $500 with that
I'll
planner.
have a better idea of what that'll be, because she just cut checks and there were planner services included.
So that is
So next week.
that's some of the challenge we're gonna have over the next couple of years, is to ensure that what comes in is actually being credited to the right account so we can project that out.
Yeah.
And because a lot of that, and I don't like to dwell on things, but we cannot spend money that wasn't appropriated. So we like to be able to show when we're appropriate, wow, that budget looks big. It's not that bad because here are the revenues that are going to go against it.
Yeah. I mean, do you think, because we do have a finance person now, correct?
Part-time.
Yeah. So is this more of a matter of the finance person had their attention in years past and just trying to catch up with the audits, or?
So, in which we'll get in with the other section, but that's was put in to have the finance position a full-time position. Then again, our 2023 audit was just finished with adjustments that still aren't balanced to our trial balance, okay? And so 2024 hasn't closed out, so it's very hard for me to show you what your fund balance is going to be to offset your taxes when I don't have that amount. You had such a turnover here that there wasn't a lot of institutional knowledge. And when you had people that stepped up to the plate to do all of this work, they neglected some of their other work. They weren't properly trained in what they were doing. And then you end up with some people's audits are behind because they can't get an auditor. Ours is behind because we can't get these to balance out, And then we've been working backwards a lot. And when you have the finance person we have now is extremely smart, but she was in the private sector for a long time, public sector a little while, but she can reconciliate. But she has a hard time because when you have entries put in coming out, you can't go back and correct them when you have no idea what those funds are, okay? And that's why we try to get a starting point and go forward off of that. But you have over $10 million coming in and out of here in ARPA funds and ACHs and everything that comes through here, sometimes $3 at a time. You have to have somebody dedicated for that. I spent 2.5 hours with the Department of Treasury, Federal Department of Treasury, because our ARPA funds weren't reported correctly for over 3 years, and they will pull that money back and fine you until you pay it back, because you've had such turnover here, there was nobody to take that and make sure it kept going forward, nor did you have the staff here that may not even know it existed, this stuff here I still don't know exists, that has that institutional knowledge to carry that through.
Yeah, no, and it's, I appreciate the staff that we have now. I think they've carried a heavy load over the past 2 years. They've kind of picked up a lot of pieces, and I definitely acknowledge that and see that. We're godsend that we have these folks and that they haven't been scared away by what they have to come up. So I think that's good all around. Did anyone have any other questions on Christina's code enforcement budget or general questions?
I have a comment. So the general idea behind having a planner was that it would eventually fund itself. So I guess we're not there yet.
I don't think a planner will ever totally fund itself. If you're just using that planner for people in the town to have a fee to go against that, you come in and you want to build something that's beyond the planning board, you have to have the planner sit down, go over it with you. Unless they're gonna charge you 140% to cover the what ifs and the whatnots that never come to provision, it'll never fully cover itself.
That
It'll,
would have been good information to have back when we were making that decision.
it's just, I'm a straightforward person, but to neglect that position or neglect that going forward with the ordinances that we're looking at now, then again, it goes back to $225,000 spent in legal fees in the last 3 years.
Yeah, and I think, it's like, it's good to have that information. I definitely agree with that. But a $20,000 line item to prevent errors that can be made at the planning board level if we don't have a planner, when you have these big projects coming in and they're using all the hotshot lawyers and all that to, pull one over you. That can happen. I'm not saying it happened here. I'm saying it happens in other towns. So I think it's a good insurance plan.
We're all just volunteers
Right,
working
well-
on these words and
Well,
codes.
and that's it. In the planning board, they go under good intent, and when they vote on something, they can't be held liable if they voted on something with good intentions, and if they don't get the proper information. But it's becoming more and more complex. Our DEP laws are changing monthly. Right now, our MUBEC laws and our energy codes, everything that's added in, it's not, being a code enforcement officer isn't like, I did it 30 years ago. I couldn't do it now. Just to keep up with the training is unbelievable. And this town is obviously a very beautiful town with a huge lake and a bunch of beautiful ponds. That's where the growth is. And that's really where you have to pay attention, because DEP has better lawyers than we do. Well, don't say that to our lawyer. DEP has very good lawyers, okay?
Rich,
They don't pay me.
I'll put a little more emphasis on just one word you had said a minute ago, and that was insurance. And I think, I hope, with the planner, we're buying some insurance. And not having, the town get into something, that they don't understand, that they didn't have enough insight or, warning about. That was the, quarry.
Yeah, well, it's also making the applicant pay for the planner to provide the town with a neutral third-party expert. So I think it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, you'll always get plans that come in, and you may have a planner, someone on the planning board that's an engineer or, electrician, but you can't count on that. And some of the plans that come in are just way too complex for the average person to go through, unless you're only doing a land use, setbacks and stuff like that.
Yeah, but I think it's more, I'm not thinking about, detailed planning. I'm thinking about a potential issue for the town. Hopefully we won't have another one like the quarry again for a long time. But I probably wouldn't have been headed, maybe wouldn't have been headed anyway, but if somebody in the code enforcement office had a little more experience or a little more insight, it might have been headed.
Yeah, I mean, you can place blame wherever you want. Comprehensive plan wasn't updated in a very long time, and that's another, folks like to point at that, which I think that's entirely accurate as well.
I was just saying, only right here. I think I've been to every planning board meeting. I wasn't here obviously at the time that the big issue happened. But I can tell you, planner is providing good insight because he's bringing things up that are not coming up from the applicant and are not necessarily known by the members of the board. So he is providing incremental input.
And I think the planner also helps when you have an ordinance review committee to consider things ahead of time instead of saying, oh no, put a moratorium and stop everything, and then you're opening yourselves up to more lawsuits. So it's good all around.
So I'm picturing town meeting, having answers to questions before the questions are asked is the important thing.
Well, yeah.
So when this comes up, because it will, I'm sure somebody will be like, why are we still funding the?
Yeah, but
So the best answer is, it's an insurance policy for the town.
Yeah, but just as we don't get to tell the Board of Selectmen what the numbers are, because they get to make the final decision. We don't have to explain this. We
No,
give
we don't.
we give a recommended budget committee,
The board
budget.
does.
We're trying to get that back down to earth, which is always nice, but, the board makes the final decisions, as we all know.
The planning board really doesn't have the expertise in a lot of these applications. And the town planner is a great asset. We're finding that a lot of these applications are coming before the planning board. Planning board's never seen it before, so very helpful.
Yeah, no. Any other questions for Christina about the budget? I know we've been asking folks, just because we're seeing a year over year 14% increase. And to me personally, that's not acceptable. So trying to ask all the department heads to give us a 5% reduction. I know your budget's a little tighter because there's not a whole lot of line items that you can attack. But do you see any potential for wiggle room in there? And, it's not something that you have to answer right now. It's just maybe something to think of going forward.
I feel like I didn't ask for more than I truly needed. I don't know that I have 5% that I can cut here.
The problem we had, and I'll bring up, is, and this is the first year that I went 20-some years ago into Oxford, being naive, I guess, but I've always done this. And after the first year, I had 12 great years of budget meetings because I don't fluff things at all. There's places you go to and the department heads, the town manager, finance people will go in and they'll say, you can say to them first year, why is your number so large, fire department? Well, because they want to cut 5%, so we up it up and then we cut 5% and they're happy. And I certainly don't do that. Once you get into some of mine, you'll see I'm probably too restrictive with retirement and health care that were mandated, hoping that the percentage of people that take it, they can all take that. And by law, we have to provide that to them. I can't discriminate against one person next with the personnel policy. And we really tighten that down and ask them to come in. There's a few department heads that come in with a budget that I don't know real well yet, that I don't know if they can tighten up. But I can tell you, going through like what we have for the administration and the code enforcement, that we want to keep this as tight as we can, because I used a bad word last night when I was talking to the selectmen about this, but the budget needs to go back to reality.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. So, just for your perspective, Michael, and I appreciate your history and your knowledge. Myself personally, and I know some of the other members feel the same way, that we felt like a rubber stamp for the past few years, where it's like, here's the budget, we never ask for reductions, we pass it on to the Board of Selectmen, and then you wonder, why am I here every night? Why am I here for board meetings? And it's not a heavy lift, but no one else is doing it. Everyone likes to wait and complain right before we have the town meeting, and then everyone freaks out when people get kicked out of the basketball court. It's silly. We're here to try to bring everything down to reality. I appreciate the fact that you've done that ahead of time, but a 14% increase after we got slammed 2 years ago, about 13%. It's just people can't afford it. You've had the sunset provision for the elderly folks that, that tax freeze, that sunset. So those impacts are, what we're really concerned about. Hopefully we can find some cuts where necessary, but I do appreciate that there's not a lot of
seen the numbers, I'm not asking you to see the number, but you mentioned the 14%. Last week, Michael brought up, and it came up in our CFP conversations, about approximately $300,000 was funny money reduction because of the allocation out of the general fund. Is that 14% inclusive of adjusting this year for that $300,000?
It doesn't really include the $300,000. The $300,000 was from last year, and that started to get rolled into last year's budget because we had an account that money was going into. It was an EMS account, but we didn't even know where it was. So our auditors found that and then rolled that into last year's budget to help us out a lot. Also, CIP, last year, the school budget was wackadoo, and CIP came and slashed a lot of their CIP investments to make it reasonable. So we came in between 7 and 8% last year, where we could have been a lot higher.
My question is that when you say they're 14% higher, are you 14% higher before or after that $300,000 adjustment?
So the $300,000 is not really included in that. We also have $10 million in expected increases in assessments. So, collecting on that will be nice. So that doesn't tell you, just because your year-over-year expenditures is a 14% increase over last year's budget, that doesn't mean that your mill rate is going to go up 14%, even if you approve this all year.
The reason I'm asking this question though is before consideration of the $300,000 that you're calculating that 14%, then you're not getting a fair representation of what two years.
No, I understand. I can only go by the numbers in front of me, and I could say, well, it's like Jim Palmer's numbers. He says he's at 200% of his paving, but it's not really there. It's some of the expenditures for last year got transferred into our budget for this year. It's really a mess, but I could still ask for reductions as a homework assignment, and then when we do have all that information in front of us, we can make educated decisions based on what we end up with.
So, just like the reference to the total insurance as it relates to the plan, it's all in semantics. And if we just start with saying it's up 14% without any kind of explanation, then yes, we citizens are not going to be happy.
Right. No, and it's 14. So 14% is just the town budget itself. Then you have the school budget. So the school budget, we're trying to keep that between 5 and 7%. When you average those two things out, the school budget's more than half of the budget. So if they do come in at 5 to 7%, even if the town comes in at 14%, you'll average that out and come up somewhere around 9. But we're just trying to get it down to reality, and if we can save some things that make sense for the town and keep the things that we need to operate as a town.
I totally understand, but I'm thinking like, if I can't see a number in terms of the actual dollar amounts and the big picture,
Right.
the detail that you have, you're just throwing out a number like that. It definitely raises everybody's antenna, and everybody's sensitive about this cost.
No, I
Because even
know.
though you come.
But that's why we're here. If we didn't look at it, if we didn't say, oh, we're concerned that this is a 14% increase over last year, then why are we here? Why just hand it to the board of selectmen?
And I don't think, and you don't have the whole picture yet. So the part of the picture we're working on now is the expenditures. You have revenues that are gonna go up, like Barry was in here earlier. Well, it looks like his is going up 20,000, when in fact it's only going up 30% of that, increase, and some of the offsets that are in there. So really, trying to up our revenues, and then every year our increase in our value. Because at the end of the day, your mill rate is just the value of the town divided by the budget. And that's what you're gonna come up with to put that out there. And the increase, to show the increase in the value and then the revenues going against it is gonna cut that down quite a bit. It's gonna cut that down to the point where I believe that the amount that you did not fund the capital improvement last year is probably gonna be about that amount. So you're gonna go up that amount to cover that up is what's gonna be that increase in there. But they had also last year, some of the warrants articles in the book, matching the spreadsheet, I've updated, so I'm comfortable this week to give you everybody updated, to have the new numbers. And when we get those new numbers, we'll be able to start tying that into the revenues that we're projecting and that increase. So you get a better picture. Say that amount that's going in, that certainly doesn't mean your taxes are going up 14%.
No, of course. And, you know, I mean, when we vote on the budget, we don't know what the mill rate is at that point either, so.
And we don't set that.
Since it's subject to years before, I really appreciated coming in and looking at a proposed budget where the entries pretty well matched what we had last year. Not every one of them sort of, or not every one, but a lot of them bumped up.
Right.
I mean, that's a hell of a task. To really not only look at all of those and you decide, well, some of the smaller ones, there's some damn increases. To really, do the job right, they would have to justify all those, to use your word, fluff numbers. And that's how it used to be. And it wasn't, I think it resulted in too much money put in the budget. But on the other hand, I guess the good news is the overruns go into the designated fund. Yep.
The fund balance, yeah.
Undesignated fund balance. So, I mean, that's the good news, but it's still, to go in starting on a basis of what you had last year and seeing the numbers be the same. I mean, that's what you would like to see every year, right? Every single item. No
Minus
inflation.
inflation.
No inflation.
The inflation's been awful in some areas that you can't even, a lot of places you'll see increment and stuff like supplies and all this, and we try to tighten up as close as we can. But some of the inflation is just unavoidable, and the labor inflation is, the cost of labor is unbelievable, which affects everything. It's just like gas affects the truck and it affects the cost of the cabbage. And it's the same thing now with employees. I wish the job market, when I got out of college, was like this. You didn't come out of college with people giving you jobs you're underqualified for at that rate of pay, but that's where it's at. Maine's never seen unemployment like this, and I've lived here, not all my life, but almost.
In the event of saving money, do we have any more questions?
Right, yeah. Send Christina home.
I do want to mention with Christina, and she's been doing a great job, that in the capital improvement, when we go with CIP, I don't know how deep you went in. The CIP committee did a great job and thoroughly went through that, but that's where the biggest bump is in here. And we did have an addition in there for some assessing program to do the mapping in-house, that because where we're tied in to notifications, doing proper notifications, especially water frontage, that's really going to help that office out a lot. Yeah.
No, that's huge. And, I just like to thank you for your efforts over the past couple of years. I know you've been responding, it's like we try to attend the planning board meetings when we can, but you've been responding to a lot of complaints as well, and that's something that you've been doing.
We appreciate you.
Thank you. Nice to hear.
And in fact, is the training tomorrow? Or would you move it?
Fire, yeah.
So we had the fire training here for the state fire marshal, and anytime we can do that and save money, we do that, and then our people can come in. The books were expensive this year, but a lot of times we get free training. Yeah.
Some of us are yeah, so 4 of us from this town are taking the class for NFPA and life safety with the fire marshal. So he's been coming every Thursday to Sebago to teach us that. We have people from surrounding towns too. So.
Thank you very much, Christina.
Thank you.
Michael, do you want to just talk about, I think some of the biggest changes are going to be for the employee benefit?
Yeah, I did want to, I did for total foreclosure, not foreclosure, but disclosure, the handouts I gave you, there's going to be some changes. I went through the spreadsheets, and there were some errors that didn't line up with the commitments last week, and it kind of drives me nuts until I can find those errors. So some of the numbers don't exactly match up what was passed at town meeting, but that's straightened out. They're not material, meaning that when the auditor comes in and the amounts that are off, he's not going to say that our statements are not sufficiently covering what we actually have. But it took a while to straighten that out. But I do want to mention that in wanting to cut budgets, and I have to go in the other direction, but just to disclose this, is that just recently got the assessing contract that people do our assessors, and that is going up $4,000. And I will be putting in, subtracting out the 7,000 in the fire department that they put in that we discussed last time. But the biggest thing at last night's selectmen's meeting was that the comprehensive plan, I guess the year before last, they, and I haven't looked and seen where they placed that, is that they started funding for our comprehensive plan, which hasn't been updated since 2006. And they're looking at 50,000 more. So you're looking at the budget we have now, and they may do 25, but I told them that I wanted to get some input from them, so I'm having full disclosure in front of this board, so you know that there's a possibility that that board is going to be looking at up to $50,000 to recommend. I have to look back to see where they put that in the past. They certainly put a reserve account. We don't have it in the CIP. We have reval in there to see where that money's at. But they are pretty eminent with the 50,000, but I think $25,000 they may do and push it off a year. As it was brought up earlier, our comprehensive plan is really aged, and they're pretty complex to do. There's a lot of data input and statistical analysis and everything put onto it. They're mandated by state law. So I just wanted to bring that up, that 50,000 is out there.
Would that be hiring a consultant or?
They would put it up, most of the towns put it out to bid now, and because there's staff isn't capable of doing that. And I did one, I've been through a few, but one I've actually worked on, used to use statistical analysis, used to use SysStat. I can't remember how to use that, and most people don't know how to use that. So it's pretty complex, even like the notifications on those. I mean, the most planning, like we're talking about ordinances and stuff, are 7 or 14 days out. Comprehensive plans are 30-day notices. I mean, so it's quite a project to do, and they're pretty eminent. They want to move forward with those to be in alignments with everything else. So, yeah, and so with that is also the CIP, because they've cut deep into that last year, and they don't want to get it far away. The town's actually pretty financially stable, best I can tell, with reserves and fund balance. I couldn't give you exact fund balance. I know where my cash flow is at, but I think after our adjustments that our fund balance is still going to be well within the amount that's recommended by government accounting standards, So that's really, as we started out, knowing that between the one-time rescue and the CIP, that really was what was enabling you to keep that so low last year. The revenues that you transferred over from the rescue was not put into as an appropriation in your commitment and then put into the revenues as typically what I would have done. So it throws me off when I'm trying to do your revenues, because you've got that out there that you did that one-time thing to put against the rescue, then to turn around and put that as appropriation and take it back out of the meeting without running it as a revenue. Okay, so that kind of threw me off. And I don't have a good idea of the cash flow of the rescue account, meaning that rescue account, they set up and said the money should go into X. The money should have gone into a revenue account that is used each year to offset the ambulance and not into any other account. So that is something else that we have to set up, that we can make sure we can track that. So when you're looking at that, we can look at our revenues and say, hey, we have $100,000 here more we can put in the revenues. I'm not at that point. And I probably was pretty straightforward that it's a year and a half out before we get all these things into alignment.
So in terms of the full-time employees for the benefit side, I'm assuming the change from last year's health insurance benefits were about 123. This year's proposed is at 142. Is that for making the part-time person a full-time person in Christine's office?
Yeah, that's averaging for 7 employees, because more people that doesn't cover everything, our liability, okay? So it's lower than we have for liability right now. For some reason, we don't have any incentive like some towns do that will pay you to go on your wife's and her husband's insurance and do that. But that's less than in there. We always have to plan to people, if we pay 14, it's 1140 a month, that's what we pay, no matter what you take, plus 50% of your spouse. So if you take a better plan, you're still only gonna get that amount. So we don't have the best health insurance, but we don't have the worst. It's not bad. It's not, we have the worst retirement, okay? We don't have the worst health and care. But we're estimating that. That's not our current liability. Some people may come in and say, all of them can come in and say, we're taking that or we want to match. We have no choice but to provide that, okay? So it's an estimate on what we had, what we think people are gonna take. And as you know, health insurance is very expensive.
Yeah.
It's a very expensive thing to have. So that's the biggest increase there is actually the cost going in. We do have, they usually vote to set up to have emergency for selectmen can come out of. So if we did have all of a sudden 3 people come in and want to be on it. But that goes right back to if you don't have retirement and health care, you will not have any employees here. You'll continue to have turnover.
Yeah. So this, with the 7 employees, would that include Christina's assistant moving up to full-time, or is that would be 8?
Yeah, no, I think that's averaging in who's taking it now and who would take
Oh,
it.
gotcha.
Yeah.
And who's the provider there?
The health insurance MMA.
It is, oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Workers' comp on them.
Yeah.
Is that because you have this-
So they went from, there's 3 different tiers in workman's comp, and it's all based on mod rates and how many people get hurt and don't get hurt. And but they picked up a discount, and they can go up one more level, which we're working on now to get another discount. And so they've been, Carolyn has actually pushed that very hard and has done a good job. And that we're working on that, but we also have some work to do with that. And the Cameron's been working on his end because that's a new department and that building's kind of funky. We have some things to do down there to be in alignment. So that's pleasant surprise there. Don't get me wrong, you can turn around and somebody can get hurt in public works and our comp rate 2 years later could go through the roof.
We have to people in public works.
Well, people looked at, and I don't want to pick on any departments, but if you look at mod rates and, people say fire departments and police departments, they're not even top 20. People in the woods, the loggers are the number 1, and that's why we really don't like to do tree removals and trimming here ourselves, because when we do that, we track it. Workman's comp, the mod rates go up, and we have to pay more money for it. And we don't want our people getting hurt. They're not loggers.
I saw that we switched banks last year, so that's probably the savings on the bank service.
Yeah, and I don't even know if that amount's needed, but I didn't dare cut it all. I couldn't track that to see what was going on there. In switching banks, and on the other end, the switching banks, if you see the interest income going up on the revenues, that's great that they move stuff around and got more interest. But on the other side of that, 3 years ago, nobody was getting any money. And then all of a sudden the banks, they weren't going to pass stress tests and they're giving you money on the CDs. The interest rates went up because of the feds and everything else, but the banks weren't passing stress tests either. So you're getting close to the Fed amounts with CDs. So that amount went up. And, when you start pulling over 4%, then rather than 0.5%, when you're averaging $3 or $4 million, it helps a lot.
Advertising is way down.
No, I think we got that flat.
On admin, it's flat at $4,000. The year to date might be down.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd have to do a detail, but that's not a lot of money for advertisement. We do a lot of advertisement because we're mandated, even though people don't read the newspapers anymore either, but.
I was just curious though, if that had to do with any of the fees being applied for the.
So if the fees were applied to that, which they are sometimes, we put that into miscellaneous revenue and budget for it.
Can I ask for some clarification on the 07-3 dues memberships? under
Yeah.
common sense?
So that one actually is going to change, because the Greater Portland Chamber of Governments, I believe would be the acronym, is 4102. When I get the next one, I'll update it, but for the amount that, to update the sheet, when I'm just going to update the whole thing after the errors are in it, that couple $100 wasn't really significant to put in there. And MMA dues, 45, 40, and that may go up. They give us the bill through halfway through the year. That is actually, where all our manuals and a lot of our training and our free legal that people call up, that can call up. So, well, we actually do get $4,500 out of the MMA.
Yeah. The insurance bond in 1907 went up about 17 grand.
Yeah, so last year, it went up that. So you ate that last year. And you had a bill, and I read some correspondence that it was brought back up that amount that went up. So what you budgeted last year didn't cover it. It was $82,000, okay, right around there. Okay, I don't put pennies and dollars in these things. And looking back, because you can't put these out to bid, and a lot of people do use the MMA for that insurance also. But looking back at your insurance policy, because we have to put together, you gotta put that out to bid and look at the timing on it and the contracts. And whoever's gonna bid on it's gonna wanna see those also. Uh, The year before last, for every dollar we paid in insurance for general liability insurance, the insurance company had a $1.70 liability to it. Okay, so for every buck we paid them, we got $1.70 back. So naturally, they were gonna, you crash your car 3 times 1 year, guess what? And that's what happened. So when you had a few people angry about that, why did it go up so much? And I heard that people were mad. I think they had reasons, so I didn't get angry with them. We will look at it. It's good to put stuff out to bid. But you can't put stuff like that out to bid every year. You gotta have some sort of relationship with it. So basically, I don't think we've had a lot of, in the last year, claims on that, but the year before, you really got hammered on that, and they sent the bill to cover it.
Now, when does that usually go out to bid? What time of year?
It doesn't, I don't know when the last time they put it out to bid here, I don't know how long we use Chambers, but I'll be looking at that to see if we need to put that out to bid, and some people are lower. MMA is, Maine Municipal Association does our health insurance, they do a lot of other insurance, doesn't necessarily mean they're the lowest, but a lot of times they are, because that's all they do, and they're pretty decent to work with too, I mean, they deal with municipalities and.
And they offer a lot of free stuff too.
What's that?
They offer a lot of free stuff as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, their newsletter is telling you what's going on. Just being able to call them out, the staff can call them out with questions.
Yeah, what you'll see is like we put forward the article to have the recreation department have an enterprise fund. Well, I write all that up and I send it to them and their legal department. They'll never go, they won't go to court with you ever, okay? They'll put that to the shredder when they're done talking to you. But they review all that and edit my work, and there's no charge for that. If I sent it to our town attorney, that'd probably be $400 or $500.
Yeah. And they, they also advocate, your membership pays for them to advocate at the legislature to try to protect towns from all these unfunded mandates. Pretty good. Well,
And speaking of unfunded mandates, that's what on our supplementary unemployment income that you see went up from 8,000 to 13,000 is our unemployment went up. And obviously we took over payroll and with that, you're taking over unemployment reporting and all that. But the state has a paid family leave now. You've probably seen all the commercials on. And it's an unfunded mandate as far as I'm concerned. And some people, just 0.5% or 1%, depending on the type of side, but it had to be budgeted for.
yeah, no, we saw that on the school side.
Yeah.
Any other major questions, going through onto, we already went over general assistance, elections stayed the same, appeals board, planning board.
One back here at the beginning.
Yeah, it's on there.
Yes. So under the Contingent services is what I'm guessing it is.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Legal,
I don't think-
line for legal.
Yeah,
You've mentioned a couple times that we're spending more than we budgeted in
Uh,
reality.
so right now, there's a couple things with that make it tough, because right now, we're at about 41,000. Last year was 75,000. You spent 69,000. Year before was 50,000. You spent 77,000. We do have, a lot of times we get court and legal costs back, and that will be put up against that. But the other thing they have that in the town warrant is they vote to put up to X amount of dollars to come from fund balance if they need that for legal. So they can transfer that over. It does a couple of things, talking about insurance policy, it does a couple of things. One, when you properly fund this legal account, and you have people that know you have that legal account and the backup account, they don't try to outspend you, because believe me, I've seen, and I'll even pick on the people personally, I've seen a company that built a house right in the middle of a bay with the ocean on the other side, where you can open both sides and drink water out of both sides. And we were 2 years with court with them, and they just kept showing up town meetings saying, we'll just keep spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the town kept voting to pay to cover that, and they finally backed out of it because they knew the town wasn't going to stop. But there are people that try to outspend you if you don't have a legal account, and towns do it once in a while too.
So
But we've had a lot of legal problems, and they're not going to be going away for the next year.
is there any backup to the legal fund? And where does that show up?
That's usually a separate article in the.
So that is a separate thing that's not part of this?
Yeah, so what they do is they'll raise let me see if I can find it real quick. Yeah, so they'll have an article in here that says to see if they'll authorize the town of selectmen to use $50,000 for whatever amount for legal fees for emergencies if needed. And
So that's not part of this at all?
no,
Okay.
no. So last year that's what you did you transferred 100,000 EMS to a ambulance account. You transferred the rest to expense account, which should have been in a revenue account, but that's all right. And then somewhere in here, I can't see it off the top of my head, you set up for emergency for personnel and for legal. And that's only if it's needed. They can take it from the fund balance to utilize that, and it has to go to the selectmen's meeting posted saying they're doing that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Michael? Michael, do you have any other things?
Don't I explain it? I will update all your spreadsheets. I didn't want to confuse everybody and throw anybody off. There's some of the numbers that weren't lining with the commitment. Like I said, I don't think they're material, but they were throwing my numbers off in the bottom. The one that took me for a little bit of a loop is the rescue monies that were used to offset a budget that was appropriated, but then wasn't showed in the revenue. That threw me off where I thought we'd be a little bit. But I can project that out. Next week when we meet, I think I can get the spreadsheet, put the amounts that'll line up, and then we'll get it up on the projector so we can take a look at it. But I did send you the money articles, because when you go to town meeting, you're going to vote on these 8 articles plus the articles that the 50,000 for whatever they want to do for legal or personnel. You guys make recommendations on them, but these are the actual money articles that need to line up with my spreadsheet. And if you make recommendations or the town votes a different number in those categories, it doesn't change the line items. That's up to the selectmen then to say if they need to move something around. But I think we kept it real tight. The biggest things with us were the lack of the finance position and the planning end of it. That's affected us the most.
Yeah.
I had a question on the money articles list, on back to roads again. Mike, I noticed you brought looks like the actual to date on the roads forward into this chart, whereas you get 300,000 as the budget. item. And now, I assume that this article list reflects what we're gonna have, these are budget items. So the roads went from 300,000 to 568,000.
Are you looking at the expenditure? Are you looking at,
Yeah, look at your money articles.
oh, okay. So if you look at the money article list and which number, you look at the roads goes down and it's probably, I have to look back, it's probably Article 3. It adds those sections, all the sections together to come up with that total that goes in the warrant article. So if we're looking at roads, hopefully I grabbed the right year here.
It's a 300 and.
I think it's inside of it, yeah, because the total of the bottom line, when you look at,
You're talking about the fee.
Yes.
on the next page for the proposed budget, it includes like road supplies, maintenance, the road. So that's actually the cost of the street.
Yeah, so that's what you actually, when you vote at the town meeting, your recommendations goes on in each one of those as a total. And this is what's called a capped warrant, meaning the selectmen capped this, whoever did this warrant capped it, meaning if you put the amount to appropriate in the line item and not down bottom where it says select board and budget committee recommends this amount and don't have it in there, then the town can vote to put that as high as they want. When you cap a warrant article and you put it in the article itself, you can go lower, but you can't go higher.
Okay, for the 568, what was the major, say the largest single, probably some paving item, some road?
Yeah, they cut back, the year before, at the end, they presented the budget, and how Jim was here, explained that, and then they cut the budget to help balance the budget last year. And that's another one of those things that, like I said, with my chart, you saved $1 to spend $4 5 years from now. So I was trying to put it back to the normal funding end of that. You will be seeing, like I said, in the future, more of a road management system getting put into place.
I think,
We've been waiting for a priority list for a while.
yeah,
From,
From DPW, like to have a priority list that's always updated.
Yeah, and
until 20.
and that takes a lot more work than people think
No,
it
I
does. Yep.
understand, but it's like you should be able to throw out maybe 5 or 10.
Well, let's suppose I'm sitting at the town meeting here, and I ask you, for the 568, what did we do? What roads were repaired or paved?
Last year it was PBD.
Yeah, so,
And the second question is, now with the new budget, the new budget is gonna be, I guess, about what we have right now, the same as we had last year.
Well, it won't be the same, we budgeted lower than we spent.
so,
Well, let's suppose it's the same, but the main cost, I think, is the dollars per mile of new paving. So if we stay in with the same budget, that means we're gonna do that, the same number of miles next year, and if so, what roads? That would be the question.
yeah, and I think that'll be answered being that Jim, right now, and I haven't had a chance to drive all the roads, which I usually do the first week I work at a place, that Jim has a list that he's bringing in, and it was reported to the selectmen's meeting, on my report, I'm losing my days, last night. And then that list goes to me to review, then we go on the selectmen. That list, not this year, but it's gonna be changing, because then again, I wanna go back to, we're keeping our good roads good and letting our bad roads fall apart, because where the money difference is, because roads shouldn't be politics, they should be, how do we make this road 20 years out, last of 20 years, that makes the most amount of sense to get there? And
I guess that's another question. The roads that we're going to front up to put in a new base, new paving, like, for example, down, let's see, what's the road down in,
Simple Corners, and that's.
well, yeah, that one would be on the list, on the priority list. But we did one a few years ago down, I'm thinking of the name now,
The swamp or the swamp line.
no, down near the lake. Down,
What are
Anyway,
the alphabet ones?
anyway, if they
I know
went
which one
in
you're
and put a
talking
whole new road bed in and do paving, it probably was, I don't know what the numbers were, but very expensive. And I guess what I'm wondering is, well, that approach is probably really not affordable for the amount of roads we have and the climate we have. Right, you can't replace total roads very often.
No, you know, a road, you're trying to get well over 20 years out of a road. But when you get to the road past the point where you're no longer repairing it, you have to go in at that point in time and take all your culverts out, put a new sub base in, recalculate out your drainage, and then try to push that new road 20 to 30 years out after that's built. But you also have roads that you get to a point, if you don't maintain them at a 15-year point to try to get another 10 years, it's going to deteriorate so bad that you're going to end up ripping that out a lot earlier. And those 5 years start adding up. Like I said, mentioned before, the math of taking all your roads, saying, I'm going to do this one this year, this one this year, it sounds like it works, and it does not work. It's been tried and true a million times, and it does not work.
So, and I understand that if you don't do the maintenance, the more minor repairs like coatings or, things like that.
Yeah.
Then you're not gonna get the 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, you're doing maintenance and getting into minor reconstruction into major
So
reconstruction.
another question is, are we really doing any maintenance? Because I don't drive the roads that much, but I really don't notice much maintenance either.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I think one of the problems is it a town road or a state road? And I think that comes into like,
well,
Right, 114,
We don't-
everyone complains about
that's right,
114, but
but it's
that's
not
like.
town
that's,
road, right?
that's an interesting point because 114 is, of course, one of the worst roads
And it's horrible,
that passes through our town.
Yeah,
And it's a state road.
it's a state road.
it ruins everyone's
You would
suspension.
expect-
Everyone thinks the roads in Sebago are horrible,
No.
that's not a Sebago road.
Well, it was like this, since I've been here, I've had 4 complaints on the roads, and 3 of them were the state roads with the state maintained. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you.
What's interesting about 114 is when you drive it, the impression I get is it was never put in right.
That's right.
And it looks like a very thin amount of asphalt, and, you know, of course, the sides keep breaking off and creating holes. I mean, you're a little bit out of, you know, off the lane a little bit.
But that's the state road plan, and this is just speaking from living on Convent Road, is it goes to hell, and then they pave it, and 5 years later, it's back to hell. So like, I mean, it's really like when we first moved on to Convent, we thought the road was, you know, people came to our planning board meeting saying the road is insufficient to have this purpose or whatever. And then they paved it the next year, we couldn't believe it, but it's back to what it was when it was first.
There's paving and there's paving, right?
I also find it interesting, I live on 114, that in front of my house has been paved 8 times,
Right.
but Long Beach hasn't been touched.
Yeah, certain
Once you get to the
sections
post
done over
office,
and
it
over.
But
hasn't touched it in 23 years.
Pavings may be
Oh,
sort of superficial. They're almost for looks.
Yes,
They are.
yes.
So-
They're not for real.
The other thing that's taking a toll on the roads is the amount of traffic that we get and the size of the vehicles.
Right.
There are lots of tractor trailers, I mean, Hancock Pond Road. I never thought I'd live to see the day with so many tractor trailers going up and down.
I think one of the,
The ordinance actually allows for those roads to be permanently posted, those banner roads too.
Well, maybe we should consider that
I think we should
as
too.
a town, that maybe save a little wear and tear on the town roads.
I mean, there's no enforcement for the posting, but even if 20% of the people, you know, wanted the posting.
Yeah, the good folks would,
Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly.
I don't know, we could spend all night on roads, but that's not even on the agenda.
it is a big item.
Well, it's a big item, and it's, you know, it's something that Michael, you know, came in and testing, part of the these days. Just as we said, we've been chasing roads, we get 3 done a year, and then no one's ever happy on which road it was, or how good of a job they did, but, I mean, I think at some point, do road commissions ever agree to go to bond to really?
I think that this board is looking at doing a bond And when money's cheap, it's not a bad idea because, you know, you gotta look at the inflation cost of stuff and sometimes it's, if you get a 4% bond and some, you know, last sewer system I put in, I got 0.75% bond, you know, of course it's DEP. That it actually keeps you ahead of the inflation by getting that in.
Yeah, there's that, but on the other hand, it's kind of like taking the can down the road too.
No,
Passing, you know, a bond,
yeah, you
The
can,
bond would give you the money and then you'd be able to do 20 or 30 roads in 1-2 years.
and how long would it take to pay the bond?
well, you can only bond out as long as a life of anything that lasts. So you can't bond something longer than the life of the, whatever, fire truck or whatever.
So 10, 20 years.
Yeah, probably 15 years.
15 years.
So this spreadsheet, the money articles, is this, did they come back with a 5% reduction from fire and rescue and?
We haven't gotten any of those numbers, but, you know.
Yeah, I haven't, so those are what we talked about last time. And, I have, what I did that for is to show you guys what you're actually gonna be voting on at town meeting and the numbers I have in there. And then your recommendations are gonna go where it says first article, second article, the numbers in between are, that's a selectman's number. So I don't, the ones that are highlighted on the right are showing you, the first one's showing you it's gotta go up $4,000 because of the new assessing program. And then the 7,000 down is because where they, the dry hydrants and the stipends went down that amount. And then, of course, the big one on the bottom is my disclosure of, $50,000 that the selectmen may want to use for, the comp plan.
And in the back, I see that the deputy chief went down, was 9, went down to 7.
Yeah, so that's what,
That was,
that back sheet, I want to show you what we talked about that night.
The savings on the dry hydrants, in the stipends was a total of $7,000 savings, which is shown in your money articles sheet. So
We'll go down that.
5%.
it's pretty close at 5. Well, it wasn't close at 5, it was like 2% or so, you know, so he was almost halfway there.
Yeah, your road department, your highway, your fire, your rescue, and your CIP, that's 60% of your budget of the town. They're very expensive.
Yeah. The, sticking with the general government administration, I know we're gonna have questions once we get some of those numbers. Just the increases on the wages, Michael, yours is going up?
Yeah, so mine is, I'm contract. So the amount you see on mine, I don't know what's in there, is I've got a contract and then 3%, like we did with everybody, we did 3%. That's up to the selectmen, they set my pay, but I assume that's what they'll do. And,
I calculated that around 7% on the wages.
on the way, yeah, because my contract isn't for what your budget is last year.
Okay.
Okay, so it's what that, my contract is, then the 3%, what they have next year.
Okay. And then, just the wages for,
So everybody get a 3% increase, is that what you're saying?
That's up to the selectmen, but that's what we budgeted in.
Okay.
And that just covers the COLA increase.
well, I'm assuming that, so on line 10080107, this is general government clerk treasurer. Did we add a position or is that just a percentage increase?
Yeah, so that is, I'd have to break that one down, but that is to have the full treasurer added into that. And the clerk, I have to look back, but the clerk, government clerk, yeah, I believe that's added, that one is specifically that one.
Treasurer was added mid-year last year.
Yeah, out of a not budgeted
No, I
account,
understand.
yeah.
Full-time clerk hired. That's what he put under the budget comparison.
Oh, on the old one, yeah. Looks like I'm looking
Full-time
at
clerk.
three different sheets.
Okay. I had more questions than this, and then I realized that they were answered in another piece. I just had to turn the page. The clerk, tax collector, full-time clerk hired.
Yeah. Does anyone have any other questions? I know, general feeling about the fire has requested those additional stipends for next year. I'm trying to gauge interest on that.
Not for it.
I mean, I'm kind of reluctant as well.
I understand why he asked for it, and I understand that side of things. He has been asked to do a lot more.
That's the paperwork.
But I'm a bit, this is not the year for increases.
I didn't catch the beginning of that conversation.
And
Well, just what, just thinking about going forward, looking for those 5%.
by the select board to the people that worked through COVID, who are still employees here, they got that money this year too. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking,
We talking about stipends? Is it-
Yeah,
okay.
stipends for fire.
Yes, so the stipends, I haven't brought that list in front of the select board, so I don't know where they're at with that. So I do have a list, and next year, like I said, I'm gonna have a list, I'll have them voted on it, because right now, I'm back paying some people and taking some out of accounts because they weren't, there was no follow-up, and everything was passed in the budget, and there's no way our people, the finance or half finance would know how to disperse that if it's never brought to them. What's that?
From the ARPA fund?
No, from the actual stipends that were passed.
Gotcha.
I have a question. The chief, the deputy chief, when they go on fire calls, do they get paid for that time that they're on the call?
Yeah.
Above and beyond their stipends?
Yeah,
Is that part of the wages,
So that's
55,000 that was listed?
yeah, and yeah, we have to, we can't pay less than minimum wage anymore. Firefighters once you went full-time, went with MMA, for the insurances and become part of the town, you've got minimum wage laws, so.
Yeah.
And they're paid at a schedule based on their certifications and positions.
Yeah.
Under public safety and rescue compensation, it says wages, 0107. And it's only $2,000.
I didn't catch where you're at.
Public safety rescue compensation. Yeah, 2006, sorry. Yeah, they have the stipends and they have the wages, and the wages it's only 2. Whereas for fire, it's 55.
Yeah, I think they only have,
Oh,
they
that's
have a couple employees.
06, that's, yeah, for rescue, that's the stipend is for the 3 officers, and then the deputy chief of rescue is the 45.
Right, and just below it, it says wages for 2,000. And
Yeah,
I'm very confused on the wages.
Yeah, I'll have to look at where the rest of that comes from, but obviously it's covered.
it was, budgeted, this year's budget was
Yeah.
3,000, they've only spent 560.
Yeah, so if you look under 2008, public safety daytime rescue is 463,000, up 2,000 from last year.
Yeah, having the wages and the stipends all spread out.
Yeah, well,
is
when you
very
go,
confusing
when you go to the
sometimes.
next line, the per diem rescue,
Yeah,
the wages are at 461,000.
right. And having time to,
That's your man hours, that also includes when we pay
That-
folks to
that.
come from other towns to respond to our calls.
okay,
The ambulances, when we have the third party, that was that funny money account that they reconciled last year.
which, I mean, it would be absolutely fabulous to actually have the accounting of, okay, we have this many calls, this many,
I mean,
towns
Anita usually,
helped out.
she usually provides that, she just.
there were
she had
so
that
many
definition.
towns at the Hancock Pond Fire last night.
Right.
So many towns, it was a
Not
big one,
including Sebago.
yes, and it was a big one.
I mean, you can see it from my head.
You can see it from across the lake. The people were posting on Facebook, the view from Wyndham,
Yeah. No, you can see
So-
it.
it
So,
was massive. So it would be really nice to have the actual breakdown of, okay, we just spent 55,000 in wages and this is what it was for. Not people, or not names and stuff.
no,
but
no, I can do it, I can do a detailed payroll anyways. I had a question for, I have to send out for who asked for, I call third-party requests, that are submitted to us, and I'll send a invite if you want me to, for them to be here next Wednesday. Okay, so is that something you typically do?
Yeah, do you know to date how many people have reached out?
I'll do a spreadsheet tomorrow,
Yeah.
and it's probably 6 or 7 in there,
Yeah.
and,
'Cause I mean, I mean, it's a good question for the, nonprofits.
There was a lot that didn't take their money last year.
Well, so last year, we had like less than half the people that usually show up at these things showed up last year,
They
so
submitted letters.
if you didn't show up, we didn't give you money. And my general question is, how many other towns do this with this like laundry list of nonprofits? Because
Oh.
to me, you know, I may or may not agree with the statement that nonprofits, like, they do their own fundraising and they have people on staff to do that. They don't have to like knock on the door of every town like they live near.
That's, well, they found it, 20-some years ago, when I was working in the town, I put a form out because they changed the laws on how you can spend money. And we had to show that it was, that amount of money would come back to the community, but I also put the highest paid and lowest paid and fundraisers questionnaire on that. And you'll have some people that'll ask for $500 from a town because they'll just randomly send them out, that have their nonprofit manager making $1.5 million a year.
Right. Well, and they just take whatever they get. I
Yep.
get it.
You talking the general government?
This is non-gov.
Yeah. And how do you, and I've always had, like I stated to one person, I can't remember, it's like, if I went to a pound, I'd probably come home with 15 puppies. But, how many people do you come in that you say, that's a great cause, but how do you put one against the other?
No, you can't. I mean, part of the other thing that I would like to see, and we've never really requested it from some of these non-govs, is how much money is in your account? You know what I mean? Like, we never ask for that, but like, if you have $100,000 sitting in your account and you never spend it, and you're asking us for a couple grand, then I'm not gonna give it to you.
It would boggle your mind to some of when I was on Mount Desert Island when I did this, and there's a lot of rich companies around there, and then the other towns started doing it, and you cannot believe some of these, they're not they're not nonprofits anymore, they're not for profits, that you have people, administrators making $1 million, $2 million, 500, American Red Cross, PBS, you cannot believe the amount of money these nonprofits some of them make. Other ones, really, they barely get by, and they show fundraisers and everything else. But it's low hanging fruit when you start talking about we need to cut somewhere.
Is it
Well,
$5,000?
what's that?
1032, 55, 55, 50. It's $5,000.
Well, if you look at the
5,500.
summary report, only one has taken the money that was allocated last year. That was voted on, and that's the LEA.
Yeah, we have a few more. We have a few more requests that just came in because in some people don't like this, but I do not disperse money unless somebody puts a request out. The auditor will ask for it, and if they really need it, they'll ask for it.
The only person after we allocated,
So this is,
all these donations and stuff. there's
yeah,
only one that
but
took
so
the money.
this might be, the reason why Lakes Environmental Association is there, because we were paying them for the first vote inspector, so that's the only thing that's getting accounted, and it's getting accounted on the wrong line. So this would supposed to
Yeah,
be
that's,
like just.
there's two in there. Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah.
This is just an accounting
Yeah.
error, and I'm sure there's many of them, but I'm pretty sure we had allocated for all these folks.
We did.
We just never sent them a check.
Yeah, and then again, I not only will not, I cannot send a check without some sort of request or invoice for the auditor to disperse funds off of for a legal warrant.
So the Board of Selectmen would have to.
No, yeah, they have to approve the expenditure, but I'm the treasurer, I have to put it on a warrant. But if somebody doesn't provide me with that request, just because we passed it at town meeting, doesn't mean we have to spend it. If they don't send that request to me,
So who
we don't
traditionally
process.
would do the request?
What's that?
The organization?
Yeah,
If you-
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
Months to work.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, I want to pay the library, I want it there, but they need to send a request for
No,
it. Yep.
Absolutely. I do have one more question, and it's down at the bottom, the miscellaneous expenses and overlay. Abatements,
The bottom of what?
7501.
Are we in the,
We're in 20-04.
And this might be a homework assignment, but Lisa can usually answer this off the top of her head, but of course she's not here.
with 2004 what?
7501, 4101.
It's like the second to last sheet.
Yeah, sorry.
7501, okay, what do you want to know?
The abatements, there's nothing. And I know, I was at the select board meeting when they were talking about changing the mill rate, and the reason they went with the
Okay. So the
13.64
abatement,
instead of 13.62 was to make sure that we had enough funding to cover the abatements that were expected. But
So
there's
the-
no accounting of abatement.
yeah, so the abatement goes against, if you see it, the abatement goes against the overlay. The overlay is what balances your mill rate out, so it's a 4-digit number. And the remainder of that, say it's $35,000, that is what goes, that amount would come out of that abatement. So they have a separate article to say to allow the town to take abatements out of the overlay.
Okay.
So there's no funding needed.
Do we know how many abatements were actually
I-
sought out?
I don't know, and what we typically like, if there's an abatement, we like a supplement against it. So, but you do get an abatement once in a while, but if there's an abatement, we like a supplement.
Last year, we were expecting, or the commission was expecting a lot of requests for abatements, because of the reval and the sunsetting of the homesteading tax act or whatever it is, the assistance for the seniors
Yeah, so
to
that's,
pay their taxes. And I'm just curious before,
the overlay is not intended to fund anything. It's to balance your mill rate, so it's a 4-digit number, okay? But with that being said, that's why you can only have 5%. Go 5% more than that and make sure your commitment illegal. But with that being said, that money that comes in, a lot of towns use that amount. If they have an abatement, they offset it against that amount that's for the overlay. So I balance it out, I got $35,000 left because I have a 4-digit, the 5th digit raised 35,000. Then they put an article saying to allow the selectmen to take out of that overlay any abatements that come into it, and it's a wash.
okay.
The rest of the
I was
abatement
just-
goes in the fund balance at the
I
end of
was
the year.
just curious as to how many people requested abatements last year.
Yeah, I don't know.
So that's
Year to date, it's like 59.27.
yeah. But how many people is that?
Oh, who knows?
Could be 1, could be 50.
I was just curious because we were expecting an influx, a lot of abatements.
Yeah,
and
typically when I do a reval, they'll put those in. But I'll tell you, it's a larger number of people that come in because of large numbers of, the increases are usually waterfront, people when they do a reval. And the problem with that is waterfront property, they go by comps. And waterfront property sales has such a good line of compensation, the comps of the sales, that when they get challenged, they usually lose because you can show that those values are worth, that properties are worth that much. Yeah.
And that's me just being nosy.
All right, does anyone have any other questions in general?
I'm good.
What was the increase in,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
what was the increase in the city?
Oh, yeah, that's the unemployment insurance. So the increase to that was unemployment insurance being one, and the other one was added in the paid family medical one.
So I assume the town is electing to do the 0.5
Town,
for the paid medical leave.
we're probably gonna challenge that we have to pay it at all.
Well, I mean, everyone else.
Yeah, but because the amount of people we have is 15, but then the per diems, so there's not a lot of clarity on that. The fear I have with it is, that they're going, so you can't collect till next year, but now they want to hire 7 people full-time at the state to administer this that are gonna have to be paid off the percentage we send in. And that if you have people that are gonna start doing this next year, like everything else in the government, it's not gonna be enough to cover it, and that 1% is gonna go to 3%, so it's not, and there's a lot of people trying to throw it out now,
No,
too.
they are trying to throw it out, and that's why, you know.
It's an unfunded mandate, I don't know what else to call it, you know?
Is this the place to bring up a concern?
Sure.
Is it? Okay. Do we have a backup plan for funding if the current administration succeeds in shutting down the Department of Education for making up the $900,000 that the federal government gives us?
I don't think there's, it's beyond my pay grade to calculate out if they cut that down, if you'd get less money or more money. I have no idea how that was funded, how it goes to feds, and they get their share, then it comes back to the state. I have no idea how that funding works, so.
Okay.
One of them concerned with the 10 days. Every month is 10 days.
Yeah.
To comply with
Yeah.
the timeline.
Well, there's that, but, I mean, it's like,
Hey.
if they do, the food service stuff is through USDA, so to get to a point where they kill that, that's, the whole country's gonna freak out.
Oh, God, yeah. Same with the Department of Education, the 20% of the school funding that goes to the states. I'm not sure how much of that comes actually directly to us, to offset our budget. But if that is cut, that's, our school budget is not small,
No,
and that's gonna be a lot on
However,
the individual
we are
towns.
minimum receivers.
Yeah, well,
We're minimum receivers, so we don't get that
Yeah.
much.
yeah.
Yeah.
it's
But the
pretty
little bit
bad
that we
what
get, you know, we're, I mean,
Every
it's
penny
a,
counts,
it-
but
yeah,
thankfully, we're not.
that's just, that's a concern.
Oh, yeah.
It is.
Sure.
More of a mess than I do.
Oh, my Lord.
All right, well, thank you everyone for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions and-
I will be sending some updated stuff. I'm losing my days here. Today's Wednesday, hopefully tomorrow, I'll send you some new spreadsheets and stuff and the new calculations in it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple things for you before you head out. so.
All right.
Terry, make sure you got that we had.
Make it quick though, because I'm on 36 hours.
I
Got
did.
that.
One is for you, I'm gonna give this one to Jim Palmer.
Oh, okay, yeah, I know what you're doing.
Contract doesn't come up for another 2 years, but give him a call. Ask all.
I'll make note of that.
I remember now.
It's 38.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, and actually started to sell it.
I will,
Yes,
So,
2 members of planning board and 2 members of CIP. And Jim makes 3.
Right.
So.
Hi, Kelly, thank you.
Hi, Kelly.
oh, someone's gonna hit the pause button over here. Someone's neglecting their job here.